Lila had always been the perfect wife to Mark. She cooked dinner every night, cleaned the house, and never complained, yet lately Mark noticed something was off. Lila seemed distant, her phone was always locked away, and she often made excuses when he asked to spend time together. One evening, after finding an unfamiliar number on her phone, Mark confronted her. Lila denied everything at first, but under pressure from Mark's questions and accusations, she finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. She admitted to having an affair with a coworker named James. It had started innocently enough, with lunch meetings that turned into dinners and then late-night texts, and eventually they had begun meeting in secret for passionate encounters. Mark felt betrayed, his heart heavy with pain and confusion. He couldn't understand how someone he loved so deeply could betray him like this. In the days that followed, Mark struggled to come to terms with the truth. He found himself constantly replaying their conversations over the past few months, trying to find clues that would have told him what was really going on inside Lila's head. Meanwhile, Lila was torn between guilt and fear of losing everything she had built with Mark. On one hand, she knew she had hurt Mark deeply. On the other, she felt drawn to James in ways she had never expected. Mark and Lila tried to salvage their marriage through therapy sessions that were painful and emotionally draining. For weeks they sat across from each other, sharing their deepest feelings and frustrations. While Mark desperately wanted to forgive Lila and move forward, he found it difficult to trust her completely. Lila, on the other hand, was determined to prove herself worthy of forgiveness. She stopped seeing James cold turkey and threw herself into making amends. She cooked Mark's favorite meals, stayed up late talking with him, and even joined a local gym to focus on self-improvement. The initial tension between them began to ease slowly, but the trust was still fragile. One day, while cleaning out the attic, Mark stumbled upon an old box filled with letters and photographs from when they first met. Their eyes met as Mark held up a faded photograph of them laughing together on a beach years ago. It was a reminder of the love they once shared, and the journey they had been on together. They sat on the floor, surrounded by memories. Lila reached for Mark's hand and squeezed it tightly. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and hope. "I don't want to lose us either," he replied. They both knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months there was a glimmer of possibility that they could rebuild their relationship and maybe even find a way to heal. As weeks turned into months, Mark and Lila continued to navigate the treacherous waters of their damaged relationship. They attended more therapy sessions, where they learned to communicate better, setting boundaries and expectations that neither had fully understood before. Lila worked hard to rebuild the trust that had crumbled, while Mark struggled with lingering resentment, sometimes surfacing in unexpected moments. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching television, Mark suddenly stood up, his face tight with frustration. "I can't do this," he said, his voice low but firm. "Every time we're intimate, I feel like I'm intruding on something that belongs to someone else." Lila winced, her heart sinking. She knew he was right. There were still nights when she thought of James, when the weight of her betrayal pressed heavily on her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I know it's not enough, but I promise I won't think of him again." "Not like that." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not just that," he admitted. "It's the uncertainty. Every time I look at you, I wonder if you're thinking of him. If you ever will." Lila wiped her tears, her resolve hardening. "I miss us," she said softly. "I miss the way things used to be. I miss the person I was before all of this happened." Mark sat back down beside her, his gaze softening. "I miss that too," he said quietly. "But I also miss the woman you've become. Stronger, more honest. You're not the same person who cheated on me." Lila nodded, her throat tight. "I'm not. And I don't want to go back to that. I want to move forward. Together." Mark hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her forehead. "I want that too," he murmured. "But it's going to take time." The next morning, Lila woke early, her mind racing. She needed to do something, anything, to show Mark that she was committed to their future. As she dressed, an idea formed, a plan to prove her dedication in a way that might finally convince him. She smiled to herself, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but determined to see it through. That afternoon, Lila approached Mark with a proposal. "I've been thinking," she began nervously. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Somewhere quiet, somewhere new. To start fresh. Mark raised an eyebrow, surprised. A trip? Now? Lila nodded eagerly. Yes. We could leave tomorrow. Just a weekend getaway. No distractions, no work, just us. Mark considered it for a moment, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Okay. He finally agreed. But this has to be different. No hiding, no secrets. Everything out in the open. Lila smiled, relief washing over her. Agreed. The following weekend, they arrived at a small, cozy cabin nestled deep in the woods. The air was crisp, the trees towering around them in a quiet embrace. As they settled in, Lila felt a strange sense of peace. This was their chance to rediscover each other, to rebuild the foundation of their relationship brick by brick. Over the course of the weekend, they talked openly about their fears, hopes, and dreams. They hiked through the forest, laughed over campfire stories, and spent long evenings curled up on the couch, sharing moments of vulnerability that had been missing for far too long. On the final night of their trip, as they lay in bed, Mark turned to Lila. Do you think we can make this work? He asked softly, his voice tinged with hope. Lila reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. I believe we can, she replied, her heart full. With time, patience, and a lot of effort. But I'm ready to try. Mark smiled, pulling her closer. Me too, he whispered, his lips brushing against her forehead. Me too. And as they drifted off to sleep that night, wrapped in each other's arms, they both knew that while the road ahead would still be challenging, they were finally on the path toward healing. Months passed, and the couple continued to grow closer, their bond strengthening with each passing day. They faced challenges, of course. Old wounds occasionally flared up, and doubts crept in, but they worked through them together. Lila had taken up painting as a form of therapy, pouring her emotions onto canvases, while Mark focused on improving his communication skills, learning to express his feelings more openly. One evening, after a particularly intense session of painting, Lila came downstairs, holding a framed portrait she had just finished. She handed it to Mark, who took it carefully, his eyes scanning the vibrant colors and abstract shapes. What does it mean? He asked, intrigued. It's us, Lila explained softly. All the pain, the love, the struggle. It's everything we've been through. Mark studied the painting, his heart swelling with emotion. It's beautiful, he said, his voice thick with admiration. You're beautiful. They sat together on the couch, the fire crackling in the background, and Mark pulled Lila close. I think we're doing okay, he said, his voice filled with a newfound confidence. Better than okay. Lila nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Yeah, she agreed, her voice warm. We are. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper, more resilient. They had learned to trust each other again, not blindly, but with cautious optimism. There were still moments of tension, of course, but they had developed strategies to address those moments constructively. One such moment came during a family dinner with friends. Midway through the meal, a familiar name was mentioned, James. Lila stiffened slightly, her hand tightening around her fork. Mark noticed immediately, his brow furrowing in concern. Lila? He asked gently, his voice soft but steady. Are you okay? She took a deep breath, nodding. Yeah, she replied, though her voice wavered. Just caught off guard. Mark squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's okay to talk about it if you need to, he said quietly. We don't have to pretend it doesn't exist. Lila looked into his eyes, grateful for his understanding. I know, she said softly. But I don't want to dwell on it. Not here, not now. Mark nodded, respecting her wishes. They navigated the rest of the evening with grace, their friends none the wiser to the internal struggles they had overcome. After everyone left, Mark and Lila retired to their bedroom, the conversation lingering in the air. Do you ever think about him? Mark asked, breaking the silence. Lila sighed, turning to face him. Sometimes, she admitted. But it's different now. It's not the same pull. I know where my heart truly lies. Mark smiled, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. And where does your heart lie? He asked tenderly. With you, Lila replied, her eyes meeting his with unwavering certainty. Always with you. They lay in bed that night, the weight of their past finally beginning to lift. The shadows of doubt still lingered, but they were smaller, less oppressive. They had come so far, and though the journey was far from over, they were both willing to keep moving forward. In the quiet hours of the night, as Lila drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. She wasn't perfect, and neither was Mark, but together, they were stronger. They had weathered the storm, and now, they were building something new, a relationship based on honesty, trust, and an unshakable commitment to each other. And as dawn broke the next morning, they both woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside, the world ready for another day. Mark turned to Lila, his smile genuine, and whispered, "Let's do this." Lila smiled back, her eyes sparkling with hope. "Let's do this," she echoed, her heart full of promise. Together they stepped into the day, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they could face them as a team. Thank you for reading the story. If you have any thoughts, questions, or would like to discuss further, feel free to let me know.